We're going to get started in just a few minutes. I know we made a huge gaffe and we have a couple of different schedules stuff. That was completely my fault. Nobody else's fault but me. We have a couple of different schedules stuffed in your folders. Don't follow any of them. How about that? Just follow whatever happens up here, and we'll get through the day. We have a power-packed day ahead of us. We hope that, and we know that a lot of folks have registered for this conference, and so people will be coming throughout the day. We hope that those of you who are already here will have the opportunity to stay for as much as you can. We have panels that are going on throughout the day that are just amazing, people that you want to hear. And in addition to that, we have our grand finale at the end of the day you will not want to miss. My guys are... Yana, could you ask Janasia and Amari, just stick your head out there and ask them to come in here really quickly, please? Here they come. Here she comes. Okay, Naj, come up here, please, so everybody can see your beautiful face. Nasia, Coding for Justice. Hold up our cards so people can see, and hold up your box. Nasia will have cards, and here's how it's going to go. And Amari is coming in also. Amari, hold your hands up high with the cards. Come up front so people can see your beautiful face. Nasia and Amari all day long are going to have these cards, and we're going to keep reminding people, because the way that it's going to work with the last panel is an open dialogue. And with the panelists, we're breaking this table down, and we're going to have an open dialogue with our sisters. It's called Real Women, Real Voices, and it's a phenomenal opportunity for the women to speak from their voice, and also for the audience members to ask for a card, put any question or comment that you would like to make, and your name on that card, and we are going to pick from that box during that open discussion and call your name out and the question, okay? And so that we can get some real engagement with the audience with our last panel. Okay, anybody have any questions about that? Okay, great. We're going to get rolling in 5 minutes, and David is going to, you know what, I'm just going to keep talking because everybody's nice and calm and seated, and so let's keep it rolling. We want to, yes?
I just had a question, I don't know if I didn't hear it, but where are they going to be?
They're going to be all around the room. So that's why I wanted you to see their faces, because you can find them, and they can, and you can just wave them over, and they'll give you an index card, and you can just write your question on the card, and then give it back to them whenever you want, okay? So I'm just going to keep this train rolling because we have a power-packed day. And I want to just start out by, first of all, thanking everybody who has taken the time on this hot summer day to come to this place and to sit in this space with us and to be here, to hear from the voices of people who need to be foremost in leading the restructuring movement for criminal justice. So thank you again. My name is Andrea James, and our organization is Families for Justice as Healing, which we started in the prison yard in the Federal Prison for Women in Danbury, Connecticut. And some of us are home now and working very hard to bring the rest of our sisters we left behind home and to create some change. And create some change from the voices of the women who are still there and from our own voices from the experiences that we've had. So thank you for being here. David, could you just come on up? You know, we've had to really force ourselves to the table. So I've been around the country twice in 2 years since coming home, and it's been quite a struggle. You would think that people would say, oh, yeah, formerly incarcerated women, yes, we want your voice. Well, not always. We have a tendency to just really ask and be pushy for things that we know need to happen yesterday. And so the pace of things is a little bit too slow for us, and it shows when we show up. And so we're not always invited to the table. And we've needed to push ourselves there. It has never been the issue with the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice and David Harris. He has opened that door for us and opened it wide, and he's made a point of putting formerly incarcerated people at the forefront of this movement. And we are here because of David Harris and Charles Hamilton Houston, and we are grateful for the support that he has continued to give us. And that I'm sure he will continue to give us. So please, David Harris.
Thank you, Andrea. So, I'm going to tell you, it's really a treat and a pleasure for me to be able to be here today. And I'm going to tell you a little personal story later. But for now, on behalf of Harvard Law School and Dean Minow, Charles Hamilton Houston Institute, I want to welcome you here to the law school this morning for what I think is a historic event. And I say historic without kind of hysteria or hubris. I think it's historic because it follows on the rally from last year, not because it's the first, but because it does follow from the rally from last year. And it's important, it's a critical piece for us to start to understand and include her story as we think about the history of a movement in this country. Too often, the role of women has been ignored or denied or erased, and I think it's critical for us not to allow that to happen. So I want to also say that, I don't know if she said, the reporter asked me leading up to this, she noticed that there's nobody from Harvard on the schedule of events, on the panel, and thought that was peculiar. And I actually am quite proud of that fact. I'm serious. I think that the point is for us to be able to open this space to people for whom it would not otherwise be open, to provide this stage for people to speak to power, which is here, and to one another. And so I don't think it's for us from Harvard, from the law school, from Harvard, to be part of this, but it is really for us and our commitment to justice and equality to provide this opportunity. So I also want to say that it's consistent with the project that we have at the Houston Institute that we call the Houston Marshall Plan. And quite simply, we are determined that we are going to call to account this nation for the devastation and damage that has been done to our communities, communities of color, poor people, those who are marginalized from the war on drugs and the war on crime. This is the result of 50 years of formal government policy of disinvestment in our communities and occupation of our communities. And it's time that we marshal all the resources we can to correct that, combat it. And I can't think of any people more prepared to do that than you are. And so it's our pleasure to join in that and to join Andrea and all of you in this effort. So I don't want to linger too much, but I want to give a special thanks. Andrea mentioned to me it's not an Houston Institute, but the fact of the matter is that all thanks and praise goes to Ernest Owens, my colleague, who works tirelessly to make sure that things like this can happen and is always there at the ready to respond. I've just asked him, because Deb asked me to see if we can set up a little child play area in the back. And he said, there's some fire marshal regulations, but we're going to work on that. So before I turn it over to Vivian, I want to make a personal comment, though. As I thought about speaking this morning, I thought about coming here as a man, speaking to a group of incredibly powerful women, and feeling a little bit nonplussed and uncomfortable about it. So, but I also started to think, you know, Friday was my mother's birthday. She would have been 87 years old. And I'm going to tell you something about my mother because I think it tells you something about who I am. My mother left college, pre-med, to have my sister. When I was born, we lived in a housing project in Chicago. My father left at 6 months. I was raised by a single woman, a strong single woman, who spent my childhood getting her bachelor's degree, her master's degree, and then her PhD. She got her PhD the same year I graduated college. She spent her evenings, she worked as a secretary, she spent all of her time typing for other people. At night, she typed for other people. She typed other people's manuscripts. And I would go to sleep listening to that typewriter. And she, to me, embodies the strength of women, the strength that gives all of us the power to do what we do. And so, in some sense, it's in her memory and in her honor that I welcome you all here, and I thank you for allowing me to speak. And with that, I'd like to introduce her. The next group really needs no further introduction, and she promised me that I didn't have to do a great introduction.
Thank you, David, for not embarrassing me with a long introduction. I'm so happy to be here today. I was sitting at breakfast with Bowie and Pat and Dion. Who else was at our table? I think Jean was at our table and a couple of other people. And I was listening to the conversation and saying, these people don't need to hear from me. They already have everything they need to lead in this movement. So I'm a little intimidated by the audience, and I hope you'll indulge me. I want to thank Andrea Jones for inviting me here today. I'm very happy to be here. It really is an honor to have been asked to talk to you at the beginning of this conference. Just a little, I'm going to shout out to some more people later, but I have to give a really particular shout out. There's someone in the audience who I met when I first started doing this work, within the first year or two that I was doing this work, and I was asked to speak on a panel in Albany by New York Senator Valannette Montgomery. And after I listened to this person speak, I didn't want to speak because she knew so much and she was so articulate and she was so powerful, and I just sat there with my mouth open listening to her, and I was like, oh my God, I need to be like you. And she said to me, you don't have to be like me, just be yourself. And I want to the courage that I've had ever since then to go on and do what I need to do to be who I am in this movement comes from that moment. And I want to give a public thank you to Deborah Smalls. So here we are, a gathering of women trying to change the world. Such a gathering has happened many, many times in the history of humanity. And I believe that women are the change agents of our society. But only if we do a few things. And I want to talk to you about some things today. Some of it is stuff you already know, numbers and statistics that you have in your head. But what I'm going to give you is just a little reminder. And then I hope to close with how we move forward collectively in a way that turns this moment we're experiencing now into a real movement that embraces everybody's concerns, everybody's strength, everybody's power, everybody's resilience. This gathering of community provides an opportunity for us to address many issues of mutual interest. There are a number of challenges that face all of us, whether we are currently incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, family and friends of people with criminal convictions, activists, advocates, community-based service providers, public servants, even in policing and corrections, administrators, policymakers, or legislators. I fundamentally believe that the road to freedom, and this conference is called Free Her, is paved by knowledge. Not just book knowledge, but knowledge about systems and practices that oppress us. Therefore, educational opportunity is really important to me and plays a central role in helping millions of people extricate themselves from a system that is designed to marginalize specific groups of people and keep them in perpetual states of surveillance, control, and punishment. We are in a period of American history wherein we hear and use terms like mass incarceration, collateral consequences, unintended consequences, invisible punishment, and disparate impact. Repeatedly, we hear these phrases. It's almost common language now. But this jargon was invented to describe a disquieting social contortion that has resulted from the overuse of criminal punishment, which has become to function as a gateway through which structural inequality raises its head. A position paper entitled Unchaining Civil Rights, written by the Center for Community Alternatives, notes that the racially disparate consequences of criminal conviction span across employment, education, enfranchisement, and equity. The United States, as we all know, has 5% of the world's population, yet incarcerates 25% of the world's prisoners. And as of 2013, the United States incarcerates 716 people per 100,000 residents, or more succinctly, nearly 1 in 100. When we include people on parole and probation, 7 million people in America were under some form of criminal justice supervision in 2013. We are experiencing not only mass incarceration, but mass criminalization. There are more than 70 million criminal history records on file in repositories around the country. And a closer look at that data reveals that criminal punishment in the United States has not been applied equally. Whites are incarcerated at 393 per 100,000, Latinos at 957 per 100,000, African Americans at 2,531 per 100,000. African American men at nearly 4,500 per 100,000. Simply put, while people of color make up about 30% of the United States population, they account for more than 60% of those in prison. With all of the conversation that has been happening in the past 5 years about the plight of black men in prison, about the plight of disconnected black male youth, the emergence of all types of male initiatives, black male initiatives, have emerged in states, cities, and even nationally with My Brother's Keeper. But we in this room know that women have always been hugely impacted by mass incarceration. Even before we saw a stark rise in the number of women imprisoned, women were impacted by the reality that their partners, their husbands, their sons, their nephews, their brothers, their fathers were incarcerated. And women became the caretakers of those incarcerated men long before we started incarcerating women at astronomical numbers, which we are now doing. Women are the fastest growing segment of the prison population, which is forcing more attention to be focused on their involvement in the criminal justice system. Such growth has been dramatic across the United States. In 1977, the U.S. imprisoned 11,212 women. By 2004, the number had grown to 96,125. In 1997, the United States imprisoned 10 women per 100,000 female residents. In 2004, the rate had grown to 64 per 100,000. Most single parents are women. The majority of them live below the poverty line. And as social programs have been dismantled, women, especially sole support moms, have been faced with the reality of having to make ends meet with no help in the shrinking welfare system in the United States. We disproportionately imprison women of color with few economic resources and many familial responsibilities. This has compounded the hardship experienced in many already impoverished communities. And though women are a small part of the prison population, roughly 7% nationally, so many ask, why should we care? And it's important to know that the incarceration of women creates some different effects that have historically been largely unaddressed in conversations that are geared to focus primarily on men. Women cycling through the criminal justice system has a destabilizing effect not only on the women's immediate families, but on the social network of their communities. Women are more often than not primary caretakers of young children and family members. 75% of women in prison are mothers, 2/3 with children under 18. Locking up women is not limited to the cost of the prison cell and 3 meals a day. Locking up women also means paying the tab for putting their children in foster care, treating health and mental conditions that have worsened during incarceration, and providing public assistance and shelter for those who are homeless and destitute upon release. America has not always maintained such high rates of incarceration. According to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the United States prison population has grown every year for the past 36 years. The rate of imprisonment in America is now 4 times its historic average. Scholars have pointed out that this phenomenon was driven by a cataclysmic spike in imprisonment, primarily of black men, again, that began toward the end of the civil rights movement. This is often associated with the beginning of the so-called war on drugs and the related racial profiling, draconian laws, and mandatory sentences that have been among the weapons used in that war. While the drug war may explain the spike in incarceration rates, it does not, on its own, account for the vastly disproportionate incarceration and criminalization of people of color, black men and women in particular, who have been the principal casualties of the drug war, and who, according to Human Rights Watch, use, sell, and buy illegal drugs at roughly the same rate as their white counterparts. So when we think about our criminal punishment system in the United States, we should be thinking not just about the sheer numbers, how big it is, but also who is really damaged by this trend and why. Who are the casualties of this series of wars, not just the drug war, but there have been many wars, both declared as the drug war was nationally declared and undeclared. The war on drugs, the war on the poor, the war on immigrants, the war on people of color, and yes, the war on women and women's rights. Women have lived in an era where the social safety net has been destroyed, and where gender-neutral zero-tolerance policies and mandatory minimum sentences have contributed significantly to this phenomenon. The once deemed invisible consequences of mass incarceration are not really invisible, and they haven't been invisible for a long time. The historical legacy of slavery and structural inequality has been embodied in America's criminal punishment system. This troublesome reality has been exposed in volume upon volume of scholarship and through empirical research. Respected scholars and advocates have been making the case for nearly 3 decades because these negative and disproportionate consequences, once purported to have been unintended, have now been exposed. It stands to reason to me that to the extent that we continue to perpetuate negative consequences and to actually create more negative consequences, they're not really intentional. Unaddressed, they become deliberate. Now, women, most of us in this room are women, have always been at the center of the struggle for justice. Racial justice, gender justice, economic justice, and human justice. Women have always stood up and fought for these, sometimes at their own peril. The past 2 decades have ushered in historically disparate impacts of criminal justice system on women, especially women of color and their families. And as key players in this struggle for justice, we need to remain together, strong, and focused, even when we're tempted to stay in our silos and focus on our narrow work. We must understand that the way to win the battle is to think collectively. This conference is called Free Her. And what is freedom? It's not just open doors. It's freedom from some things, right? It's freedom from tyranny, freedom from oppression, freedom from violence, freedom from ignorance. And it's freedom to some things. Freedom to live, freedom to pursue happiness, freedom to learn, and yes, even in a movement that is largely dominated by men, freedom to lead. I don't know how many of you have read Alice Walker's The Secret of Our Mother's Gardens. Probably many of you have. There's a term in that book called womanish. And some of you, depending on your cultural background, may know the term womanish. You know, she's womanish. She thinks a little bit too much of herself. She thinks she can do whatever she wants, say whatever she wants, go wherever she wants. She's just too womanish. Well, in the 70s and 80s, there were a group of women theologians who were trying to break through the oppressive barriers in the church. In many of the African American denominations, women were not allowed to pastor a church, weren't allowed to speak from the pulpit, and brilliant women like Renita Weems and Jacqueline Grant and Dolores Williams came up with their own theology in response to the church's discrimination and in response to the white feminist movement. They came up with the womanist movement. And the word womanist comes from the word womanish. African American women at that time in history were trying to find a place in existing movements, the Black liberation theology movement, the feminist ideology movement. And together with Renita Weems, Dolores Williams, and Jacqueline Grant trying to develop a theology around their Black womanhood, they joined with Patricia Hill Collins, Bell Hooks, and Alice Walker to come up with womanist theory. And womanist theory really means this, that all oppressed people have something in common. Womanists focus on the socio-political concerns of African American women, but they include the plight of all oppressed people. Women seek freedom from gender discrimination, freedom from social and economic marginalization, and freedom from racial oppression. That's our role here today. All of us know a little something about the issues we're discussing. Some of us know more in one particular area than another. But we're here collectively today to address, or at very least, acknowledge the root causes of the challenges that face us. We're not here to just tinker around the edges with small-scale responses based on already failed policies and practices. If we tinker around the edges, to me that's like, it's like rescuing people from a deep hole in the ground that people keep falling into and saying, well, we've got to do something about this hole in the ground, and then covering up the hole in the ground with a thin layer of grass. Well, people won't see the hole and they'll continue to fall in. So we can't tinker around the edges. It's up to us, it's up to all of us to work against efforts that establish a de facto caste system. We each have a very specific role to play. The issues are highly complex and no one group can solve the problems alone. Territorial silos must be dismantled. The channels of honest dialogue, collaboration, and shared resources must be opened, and working together, we must develop concrete strategic plans to address not only the symptoms, but the root causes. Demanding freedom and justice for all is by no means a modest goal, but it's a worthy one. Every woman with a criminal history record who wants to be described by something other than a list of failures and deficiencies, we're here today to say, free her. Every mother who wants her children to be defined by their human potential and not merely defined by criminal desistance, free her. Every woman who is fighting against racialized policing, prosecution, lack of resources for public defense and sentencing, fairness in her community, free her. Every transgender woman who is illegally targeted by the police, harassed and abused, free her. Every woman who is directly impacted by criminal justice systems and who wants not merely to survive, but to thrive and become a leader, free her. Every sister soldier trying to change the world on a shoestring budget, free her. Now, I'm leaving us all with a challenge: to act collectively, to force a seismic shift that will elevate once and for all equality and freedom, and that will actively seek to crush the structural inequalities that have ushered in this era of mass criminalization. Our collective voice, as well as our commitment to equality and justice, will be imperative if we are to turn the current moment into a movement. So we all work on different issues and in different campaigns with different slogans, and they all matter. As a womanist, they all matter to me. Black Lives Matter, Say Her Name matters, Million Hoodies matters, Free Her matters, Education for All matters, Ban the Box matters, Bail reform matters, prison conditions matter, sentencing reform matters, policing reform matters. It all matters. And whether you're an advocate or a researcher or an educator or a lawyer, an activist, a direct service provider, an elected official, even if you're a police or corrections official or a member of the faith community, your input is needed. Your help is needed. Your commitment is needed. The wars that have left a disturbing legacy that we want to change are going to be hard fought. And as we know many times with women who've been impacted by criminal justice, there is a history of trauma. Recent report talked about the sexual abuse to prison pipeline. We must be careful to take care of ourselves as we move on this journey, because trauma may heal, but it doesn't disappear, and it can be reinvoked by some of the difficult times we have running organizations that are trying to change the world. There are spaces we're in sometimes where we're re-traumatized by the very process of trying to do this work. But I'm here, again, to bring to you the idea that we are womanists, that we care about all oppressed people. And Renita Weems wrote in her book, Just a Sister Away, with African American women largely in mind, Renita Weems probed beneath the surface to find how the women that she learned about in seminary, women of scripture, but think of it as an ancient text if you're not religious, how they felt about themselves by looking at how they treated other women. Believing that a common thread of sacred female experiences continues to bind centuries of women, she offered the hope that we are just a sister away from our healing. We need to connect as women in order to do this work, and we need to connect across class, culture, race, and time. So when you're struggling to try to do this work, Tina at Worth, I'm just a sister away. Ellen, when LSPC needs a word, I'm just a sister away. When All of Us or None wants to do a Ban the Box rally in DC, we're all just a sister away. When Justice Strategies needs an advisory board member, I'm just a sister away. When Amachi Ambassadors needs advice on how to write a grant, just a sister away. When Echoes of Incarceration wants to understand how to increase their power to speak to those who are in charge of our politics, we should all be just a sister away from them. The history of this movement is largely male-dominated. And I have witnessed over the years many women try to do this work. In the struggle for resources to sustain our work, we sometimes become involved in the madness of self-preservation. And I'm in a space now where the organization I run has been growing over the years, and it's a lot to manage. And it is really tempting to just try to hold on to that, to build it, to keep it together, to sustain it, and to not see myself as part of a larger movement. But women have always functioned collectively. It is how we got through the Middle Passage. It is how we got through 400 years of slavery. It is how we got through the Civil Rights Movement and Jim Crow. And as David Harris said earlier, it is how many of us were raised, the collective power of strong women who, though marginalized, took it upon themselves to change the future of their families. So today, at this Free Her conference, I want each and every one of us to leave here free to lead. That the work you're doing is vital work. You are a leader. You are valuable to the work. And women aren't just a small segment of the people impacted by criminal justice, because every man who is or has been incarcerated has a mother. And every one of those mothers is impacted. They may have a sister, a wife, a niece, an aunt. Women have always been hugely impacted by mass incarceration. This is not new information. So, feel free to lead, and remember, look at the person on your right, look at the person on your left. Just remember, she's just a sister away. Thank you.
Vivian, thank you. Thank you, sister. Boy, great. I'm so happy to see so many people in this space and to have heard the words of Vivian and how important that is, because that's how we get down every single day. All of us, just a sister away. And that's why we're standing here today, and that's why we've convened ourselves today. So we are going to keep moving because it is so packed today with powerful information. And we're going to weave in some of our why are we here moments again for those of you who were here last night and heard the powerful words of Susan Rosenberg and Tina Reynolds and Deb Small. And we are going to, and Kemba Smith, and we are going to continue to weave in that information throughout the day, and largely because we have the honor of all four of those women that are going to help moderate the panels that are coming up. And so, Kemba, can you come up, please? For those of you who weren't here last night, and you'll hear some more from Kemba, This is our Kemba Smith, our phenomenal Kemba Smith, who told us a lot about her journey of coming through the federal prison system. We are very fortunate to have Kemba with us. Kemba was sentenced to a 24-and-a-half-month sentence in the federal prison system. Years. I keep saying that. Years. And when you talk about the power, I had the pleasure of speaking to Congress with Kemba a couple of weeks ago, and I met her parents. You talk about the power that we have to take a stand and to stop what's happening. We can do this. And Kemba's parents are an example of what can be done when people care enough to say, not mine, not mine. And we are here today, and we're not gonna be tinkering around the edges. This is a working conference. And I want to ask a dear friend of mine, and she and I are from the same community, and we grew up together. And we are fighting right now. And I'm doing this because we are in a fight. And I want everybody who is here to understand that you hear about things changing, we hear about commutations occasionally happening, but at the front end, we are still allowing this system to take our children away. Leanna and Brandy, can you please just stand right now? This is very difficult. Brandy is one of ours. She's from our community of Roxbury, Massachusetts. Brandy, raise your hand. Leanna is her mother, who is my dear friend. We are in a fight. Brandy is in a current indictment on the very broad charge of conspiracy right now in a federal case here in Boston, Massachusetts. She is a young mother of a young son. And just like Kemba, those years ago, when her mother and father said, we are going to fight, and we saw what they did to Kemba, and we are just here today to say, this is very real. This is not just a convening or a conference that we put up a flyer on a billboard for. We are women who mean to create change, and we will not stand by and let this continue to happen to our families and our community. We are in a fight. And this young woman, and many young women just like her, but you know what? We have a face to put on this fight, and this face is Brandy. And we will not let them do what they continue to do. Things are not changing because we are still at the front end saying that it is okay to take this young mother and put her in a prison for something absolutely ridiculous that she should not go to prison for and separate her from her son. So we are in a fight, and this is what it's all about. It is very real. This is not just a pleasurable, entertaining afternoon for us. So please help us. To make that connection so that people understand we know what can happen, and we are in the fight right now to make sure it doesn't happen again with Brandy. So thank you for allowing me to do that. I'm going to turn this over to Kemba. I'm going to ask our family panelists to please come up. Panelists, you guys know who you are, and grab your seats.
All right, so I had no idea about that part, Brandy. Even though you hear about the time that I received, we're in a new day and time. I was sentenced in 1994 to 24 and a half years. Don't you lose hope. I beat up on myself because of certain choices that I made, but understand you do not deserve to go to prison. You do not deserve to be separated from your child. So no matter what happens when you walk into that courtroom, you hold your head up and you be strong holding on to that. And you fight. Mom, thank you so much for being here and being by her. My parents stood by me 110% when they didn't even know all of what I went through in the beginning. But you will get through this. And I'm very touched that, Andrea, you took the time to recognize them. But I'd also, too, I want to see this Free Her conference. I want to see people in the hood, women, people of color, our people. I want to be able to empower them and give them hope. So somehow, some way, we've got to shift this focus into figuring out how we can get our communities to come in here, or either we have to go into the communities. I'm not going to, because we only have a little bit of time. I gave birth to my son while I was incarcerated. For 5 minutes after I gave birth to him, the U.S. Marshal said that my leg had to be handcuffed and shackled to the bed. I didn't think I was going to make it through. And I thank God that my parents were able to take care of him after I was sentenced. And then I was transferred to a federal prison out in California where my parents and my son lived in Virginia. And of course I wasn't able to hold, smell, touch him after my 2-day stay in the hospital because in the county jail you're not able to have physical contact. So it wasn't until about 5 or more months later when I was transferred to this federal prison out in California where I was able to touch and hold him. And fortunately, my parents were able to take this trip. And then later I was transferred to a prison in Connecticut. And I'm grateful that I had my family, my parents that took it upon themselves every holiday. Instead of being with the family, they were in federal prison coming to visit me. And oftentimes, people ask me, what kept you strong? And what kept me strong was the fact that I was grateful that I was able to see my son every other month. But when I looked at some of the other women who were years and hadn't seen their child but still had joy in their heart and were able to smile and laugh, you had women who were in this country, their children were born in this country, and they knew that after they finished their time, they faced possible deportation and being separated from their kids, and yet they still had a smile. So I kept strong because I saw some of these other women that hadn't had any contact with their children in years. And so I'm very interested in hearing from all of the panelists and what they are doing in our communities. We're going to start off with Gina Clayton. And she is the founder and executive director of SC Justice Group, a groundbreaking nonprofit empowering women and incarcerated loved ones. She was named a 2014 Soros Justice Fellow, and Gina holds a BA in American Studies and Ethnicity from the University of Southern California and a JD from Harvard Law School. Gina, we're looking forward to hearing from you. And just because moderators are supposed to be timekeepers too, I apologize, but I believe each of you all will have 5 minutes. I don't know how long your comments have come to, but hopefully in the end you'll all be able to have closing remarks as well. So Gina.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. I feel really humbled to be here with all the sisters and the people who support sisters that are in this room today. Things got real for me on this campus. I was a first-year law student. No one in my family had ever been to a place like this, ever. I was sent to go do something, be somebody, come back to the community, bring resources, tools, and maybe some money. With high hopes and expectations, I came and I sat in a room not too far away with the recent realization that somebody close to me who I love very much was being sentenced to 20 years in prison. I sat in front of a criminal law professor, a white man who did not understand how to explain to me criminal law. As I walked home to my dorm room, I thought about the letters that I would write to the sentencing judge telling him that I knew people now, that I was here, that I had arrived, that he couldn't do this to us, that this judge wasn't able to send him away for 20 years, but that's what they did. I am a woman with an incarcerated loved one, despite all of what my family had hoped to do when they spent lots of money. I'm still spending lots of money on an education like this, on being in a hall of power. Things got real for me, ironically, when I was here. And that's why I appreciate the realness and most of all the sisterhood that is in the room today. Because this, if it hasn't impacted you yet, it will, or you just don't know that it has. This is an issue that is impacting everyone, and women in particular. I graduated from law school, I became an attorney in Harlem, and I represented women who had family members in prison because now this was my heart and this is my passion, and I knew I had no other place to be but with women who were in communities, the mothers, the sisters, the daughters, wives, and girlfriends of people behind bars. I represented them in housing court as they fought tooth and nails to save the homes that now were trying to be stripped away from them because somebody that they loved was undergoing criminal charges. The backbones of communities and families I saw as women were being attacked, but were rendered not directly impacted enough to be leading any single movement or being quantified or counted or covered by research. I transitioned my practice in Harlem and I left with 1,000 questions. What is mass incarceration doing to women in this country? We know what it's doing to black people. I feel like I understood that I was a black person before that I understood that I was a woman. When I say that, I mean that in a political sense. I understood my political identity as a black person before I understood that I was politically a woman. And that has been, that's the way it works, apparently, according to all of the feminist and womanist literature that I have come to read. That's the way it works. We learn later on that women are a directly impacted group in the society, that patriarchy is a thing that we should be able to say, as well as racism, and confront and address. So I left with all of these questions. What is mass incarceration doing to women? What is it doing to gender equality? Why is there no gender frame? And why are we not counted as directly impacted? Why aren't we not counted? I was asking this question. How many women, I remember I talked to women like Grace Bauer, who sits up here. I talked to women who had just been blowing my mind with their stories and their accounts. I did all these interviews, and I saw that, as women talked about the loved ones, the people who they saw go behind bars and how they were being, traumatized and tortured, that my concern was, what about you? What's happening? Look at this beautiful woman who now all of a sudden his life has been overturned and redirected and reconstructed because of this system. What about that? I wanted a number. I wanted to know how many women with incarcerated loved ones are there in the United States. I began to ask questions, and no one knew. And to this year, we've been working on this for some time, and it hasn't been until this year that we know that 1 in 4 adult women in the United States has a family member in prison. And you want to know that number is not original research. No one decided to come and count us. This is a number that was derived from other numbers that, we kind of put together. It doesn't actually represent, we haven't actually counted Latinas in that population. And when you hear 1 in 4, and I want everyone to remember that, 1 in 4 adult women in the United States has a family member in prison. What is that not counting? Girlfriends, non-married partners, right? Because those have not been counted as family members. It's not counting people in jails because we're talking about prison. It's not counting immigration detention. So when you think 1 in 4, think way more than 1 in 4. Think everybody. I run an organization called SC Justice Group, and we're hell-bent on harnessing the collective power of women with incarcerated loved ones to create a movement against mass incarceration, to build and join and populate all of the fantastic work that's going on here. Fill these rooms and these halls so that the 1 in 4 is seen, is heard. For black women, that's nearly 1 in 2, by the way. There are many of us. People ask me, how are you going to find these women when you go about populating this movement, Gina? I'm trying to fundraise and get grants and everything now. That's a whole other world. And conversation I need to have. Some sisters in the room. But, you know, I kind of lied. I was like, well, you know, I'm a community organizer, so, you know, and there's a lot of women, so you know, you can't swing a purse without hitting one of them. Like, they'll be there, trust me. And I had to think, like, all right, you know what, this is not how this works. I know better. And it was on a visit to San Quentin that it was unrelated. It was just, you know, working with another organization, that all of a sudden it dawned on me and a program member on my team, and men kept coming up to us and saying, look, we heard about you, and we heard about your organization. What I want to tell you is remember the name Shanice. Remember her name because that's my daughter, and she needs a community. She's out there loving me hard from outside in, and she needs a community of sisters, of women who understand her. Remember that name. I can't write nothing down, but remember that because she's going to come to you. I'm going to tell her about you. And it dawned on us, this is our strategy. Men and women inside are our most promising referral network. They will populate this movement. They have a place and a space and an important, there's an opportunity here. So we send around these nomination forms. We don't really do it according to any, we have to make sure that it fits within some rules, but we send around nomination forms kind of just to people we know inside, and they can pass them around, and we get back these letters. And now that's my job, is reading these letters about these women who are in these far-off places, sometimes from other states, about how amazing they are and how they need community, they need sisterhood. And really, I just want to say one more thing, because I feel like I'm probably at my 5 minutes, and I actually want to hear from all these other ladies. I just want to say something about sisterhood. This is not new. Everything is about innovation in these days, and scaling and being big, and we've sat on this strategy of sisterhood. We've used it, we've leveraged it for years, for generations. I feel like my role is nothing but a small sliver in a liberation story that has gone on a long time. And so Essie Justice Group is named after my great-grandmother. This was the sharecropping farm that she lived on and moved away from in 1938 Louisiana, when Louisiana was in the top 5 lynching states in this country. She moved by herself with 3 kids in tow and moved to California and had 3 jobs with 3 kids. And when I went to my grandmother to ask her, well, you know, Grandma, I'd like your blessing. My great-grandmother, who really raised us, she passed away a month after I started my work in Harlem. And I asked my grandmother for her blessing to use the name for the organization. And I said, my grandma, you know, before I go around telling the family lore, can I just do some fact checking on this? How in the world is it possible that that we called her mom, her name was Essie, how is it possible that she raised 3 kids and had 3 jobs and did all that? I can't fathom that kind of work. Can you tell me how that worked? What was the strategy there? And she said, oh, baby, you remember, she had sisters. And sure enough, she did. And so what I believe, and these are pictures of her sisters. I don't have a lot of things you can come see, but this is what inspires me, because I know that sisterhood is powerful. It's powerful. And if we can come together under sisterhood and remember that how powerful we are with this strategy, with this old but given to us strategy from our ancestors, we will win.
Drea, where are you? You should have picked somebody else to moderate, because I don't know. Gina, wow, thank you so much. In the spirit of our sisters, yesterday we talked about last night while we were here, in the spirit of our ancestors, so thank you, and in the spirit of Essie, thank you for what she created in you and for your commitment and what you're doing. I'm going to move on to the next panelist, who is Barbara Fair. I've had the opportunity to cross paths with her years ago, and she brought me to Boston, and she's done a lot of organizing work here. Barbara Fair is a community organizer in New Haven and founder of the organization of My Brother's Keeper. Barbara?
Hi. I want to first thank Andrea for inviting me. I'm really honored and humbled to be here. My organization, My Brother's Keeper, is not the president's organization. My organization was here before he even thought about it. And so I've been an organizer for many, many years, but one of the people who really shaped a lot of my work around drug policy, she left the room, is Deborah Small. And when Vivian was talking about this woman who she never wanted to go behind and everything, I looked at Debbie and I said, boy, that sounds like you. Because that's how I've always felt after the first time I ever met Deborah Small. She really shaped my path toward the war on drugs, so I'm always honored to be in her presence. Today was a challenge for me because first it was supposed to be about being a family member of someone who's incarcerated, and then it also about talking about the work that you do. So I've been doing so much work, I feel like I've been doing a lifetime, so it's hard in just a few minutes to talk about the work that I do. And then I've had a lifetime of pain around being a mother of incarcerated children. I have 7 sons. Every single one of them has spent some time in prison. And it's always around drug policy. If not for drug policy, I never would have had to been in this position. And I actually have a son who's getting ready to go in. And again, around drug policy. He's a hard-working father, 3 kids. When he's not working, his 3 sons are with him. They're all babies. And so now he has to leave them for a year for a drug charge. So I'm trying to go through another year of pain. So anyway, it was hard talking about being the mother of an incarcerated person. When Vivian said that mothers have always been impacted by incarceration, it was definitely the truth, because I can't even remember when I haven't been impacted by incarceration because of the war on drugs. So anyway, the work that I do primarily is around drug policy, but I also do work around prisons, and I got to learn a lot about what goes on in prison, the inhumanity of that. I actually, which I have buried so deep that I rarely remember, that I actually spent 15 days in prison myself about 40 years ago. And to this day, if I ever get in touch with that, the feeling that always comes up is the feeling of humiliation. When you go in, I was raised in a family where, you know, your body was private, and then have to go inside and have someone strip you down. So I think I buried that purposely because I don't like going back to that place. But prison destroys. It's not about just punishing, it's how it destroys you, how it tears you down. And some people never recover, and I'm actually experiencing the son right now, my youngest son, who has never been the same. Prison completely destroyed him because he spent time in solitary. He already had a mental health problem when he went in, and being in solitary just completely stole my son from me. I'm sorry. I probably should have just stuck with the work that I do. So anyway, it's been about at least 30 years of working on trying to break down this system. And when I first started out, I was always around prison reform and criminal justice reform. But because I've been working in it for so long and seeing and, you know, going to legislative hearings and, you know, testifying, trying to get changes made, and at the end of the session is just a little significant switch in the policy, it really didn't change anything. I come to the realization that it's not about reform anymore. We have to dismantle this system. We have to tear it down. Because it is built on the foundation of white supremacy and black inferiority. And until we can dismantle that, we will do nothing but continue to tweak this system, and our children will continue to be stolen and put into that system generation after generation after generation. And thank God that I was raised to be a strong black child, so I'm a strong black woman. So I know we can do this, and we can do it together. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you for being that strong black woman, and in spite of you going through what it is that you're going through, and I've seen you doing your work, and you've had me come and be a part of that work. Just keep doing what you're doing and being that light for everybody. We're talking about families and trauma. I have to mention two people. Michelle West, you'll see a few people around the room that have on Michelle West t-shirts. Also Danielle Metz. They're both serving life sentences. They've already both served over. Michelle has 2 life sentences, plus 50 years, plus 5 years supervised release. All of that is crazy, okay? And they both have been in prison over 23 years now. And they had children when they went in, and Danielle's missed her son's wedding, missed plenty of events. Michelle's missed her daughter's graduation, but their kids are still being 110% supportive to their parents and wanting their mothers to come home. And so it's just ridiculous and unfortunate, but I felt as if I needed to say both of their names, but there are a whole lot more. That's why I'm happy for the 46 commutations. I'm very happy what President Obama's done, but in that next batch, I want to see more women and families being reconnected. Okay, sorry. The next person we have is Ms. Gail Muhammad, and I fortunately have had the opportunity to work with her before. She's out of New Jersey. She's the founder and CEO of WWNG, is well known for her work helping families with loved ones in prison. For the past 15 years, Gail has worked tirelessly advocating and lobbying for changes in our criminal justice and prison system. Gail is routinely called on by national organizations, committees of the New Jersey Legislature, New Jersey Department of Corrections, and the New Jersey State Parole Board, just to mention a few, to give a testimony on a particular issue or bill. Gail?
I'm gonna try not to cry, because you know now, but I got nothing right here. First, I want to definitely give praise and thanks to my sister Andrea for convening all these women in this. And I'm really especially humbled that Kimba introduced the panel, because when I started doing this work, God knows so many of us fought for you. Just being a layperson and reading the Ebony magazine about your situation, and when you first came home, I ran into you in the elevator, and that was such a moment for me as a wife of a deceased person who died in prison, and finding my own way around this criminal justice system. So I'm really about full right now to look at this beautiful sea of women and the few guys that are here. Well, for the first time, usually it's guys and a few women, so I'm ecstatic about that. What brought me to this table was that I married a man in prison who had been looking for me, and I always told him, why did you want to put this hell on me? But I guess God put it in his heart that I was the one, because he died 18 years ago, and I'm still here talking about ending mass incarceration and the war on drugs. But in the midst of being a prisoner's wife and an activist and an organizer, I got the opportunity to hear from women in New Jersey behind the wall. And I'm going to pay homage to Eddie Ellis, who is no longer with us in this struggle, who would visit with me behind the wall in New Jersey to the women's facility. And in hearing the stories about women changed almost my life in this work. To have mothers and daughters and sisters go to jail because of who they fell in love with or who they loved, whether they were there as battered women or a wife who picked up the phone and answered the call because their man was in the streets, you know, earning money to feed his family, because that's what I called it, was an eye-opening for me as a woman. I can't imagine that happening to me. And so I began to sort of shift my work a little bit to deal with the women's issues, because they just were having problems getting sanitary napkins and things that we as women needed to survive. And I couldn't understand how in New Jersey, with it costing $45,000 to lock up one person, why are we spending all this money to keep people like you and me in a cage? So, I am a sister, like my sister here. You can't keep me from the table. As a family member, I said, the buck stops with us. We're the people that keep you sane while you're incarcerated. We're the family members that fight with the attorneys and public defenders and lawmakers to get your case heard. We're the people that are paying for the attorneys and working 2 and 3 jobs and not having a life of our own anymore, because now we're incarcerated with our loved ones. So there was a reason that we had to be at the decision-making table. And so because I am a womanish, we got to the table. So it has been a very long struggle to change the minds of not just only our policymakers and decision makers, but to change just average people's opinion on how they look at people in prison. And that was important to me, because yes, my husband was in prison. Yes, he died in prison. But this particular gentleman didn't do the crime. And so one of the things he used to always tell me was, don't feel sorry for me, babe. Maybe God put me here to mentor these young men. And so he went to work behind the wall. He was one of the best jailhouse lawyers in the state of New Jersey. He was in the Nation of Islam. So he always was a revolutionist. He never let prison control his mind. He never let them incarcerate his mind. Yes, they had his body, but they never had his mind and his spirit. And that went a long way with me, because it helps me in doing what I do today, because I know I never was an organizer. I'm a food and beverage manager from the casino industry. I like to feed people. That's what I like to do. But I had to transfer all of my skills to learn how to fight this fight, because nobody in my family had been touched by incarceration, so nobody understood. So I found out throughout the years of doing this work, when I go into the churches, people in the faith-based community aren't even providing a safe space in their churches for people who have loved ones in prison to talk about that. So there's something so wrong with just the whole society's view on who goes to prison and whose families that they're coming from. I have had members now that I have grown up with throughout the years, like watching Kimber do in her life. Their children are being targeted for the next generation of incarceration. I've actually been watching some of the men's kids that have been in support groups with their mothers because they didn't have babysitters, now being targeted by the police in their community as criminals. And now they have ruined these kids' lives. So family reunification was really important, and to end intergenerational incarceration. My husband's children have gone to prison behind the police in the community, knowing that they were children of an incarcerated parent. So I think it's really, really important for us to dismantle this whole system. And I could just go on and on and on, but to me, the ball stops with the family. I think families have to have a safe space too. I've been told many times that I don't belong at the table because I've never been in prison by those that I've been in prison, out of the prison fighting for. And so to see us as women come together and take the lead, I believe it is our job to fix this, because we can continue to support institutions and things that are not working, and until we take control of this, it is never going to stop. So we have to dismiss this. Of going to Tennessee with the Children's Defense Fund. And some of the things that I've been doing with the late William H. Buckman, who was our partner and forensic attorney, I found so many kids coming into our office and their parents needed lawyers because their kids were being targeted by the community policing. And I watched our lawyers keep them from going to jail because they just had private counsel. So, Angela, thank you, babe, for letting me be a part of this conference, because attorneys are so important to this work. And we're trying to recruit attorneys to defend our kids and shut the door from the front end, because we know that this system is fed by money. And it is the women who are paying these attorneys' fees. So I'm trying to create a legal defense fund through Women Who Never Give Up to help our youth. And I have two amazing attorneys that are still with me, that are young attorneys that want to do the work and just need funding and help. So I definitely think the sisterhood is incredibly important to this work.
Thank you so much, Gail. Thank you for your commitment, and this is actually the first time I've ever moderated a panel, really, so I feel like Andre set me up, because I'm not going to stop y'all from talking. I appreciate you all, summing it up fairly quickly on some really, really heavy issues. And we are about a sisterhood and free her, so Barbara, it's okay for you to be vulnerable. Gail, it's okay for you to be. I know I'm going to be vulnerable. That I'm vulnerable even when I'm not just around our sisters. So please feel free to express your emotions. Don't feel like you have to hide it, because I know another mother down at the end when we get to her. But let me just keep on with the program. Next we have Miss Lily Branch Kennedy, and she's actually one of my homegirls from Richmond, Virginia. We need to do more work together. We've worked on another occasion, but I know she's doing great things, and I get all of her emails. She's founder and executive director of RIHD. Shocked by the conditions she saw in 2002, Branch Kennedy launched the nonprofit all-volunteer statewide resource information help for the disadvantaged to provide transportation for families of prisoners and organize them to work for change. To date, RIHD has assisted more than 1,000 families with ongoing transportation, holding monthly support meetings, and hosting children with incarcerated parents at year-round summer and after-school programs. And I'm going to just stop there because I know Lily will talk about her other program. But Lily, can we hear from you?
Amazing women, amazing stories, amazing things. Thank you, Andrea, for just including me in here. I'm just honored by this here and humbled as well. In 2001, I think I said 2002, 2001, well, in 1988, I moved from New York City, born, raised, grown in New York City. Everybody knows what was going on back in the 80s in New York City. No, we didn't move, we went, okay? I'm a daughter of two educators, parents who are educators, put it that way. Well, middle class, East Harlem, 5 kids, none of us ever in the criminal justice system. In fact, my father, educator, but later became a probation officer and then a director, having to deal with young people, diagnostics. But anyway, this is not what, I'm just trying to get a framework of where I'm leading to. So my husband and I, we packed our bags and left, and we took the kids to Virginia for a better life, for to avoid the one thing, is the criminal justice. My son, good child, intelligent, educated, talented, and gifted, went on to Virginia State on an academic scholarship. So he was a pretty smart guy, you know. He was in the Marines ROTC in high school, no problems. Had waiting with no problem, every mother's dream. Okay, when he graduated from high school, I was like, it was my graduation, you know. It was like, I'm done. When he went off to college, I am now truly done because I've done my work. 2001 came around. Never in a million, no one could have told me. Now I want to just say one thing prior to that. I'm one of them hypocrites, and I can stand here and I'm woman enough to say I was one of the hypocrites that said, if y'all had sent, I was in this meeting here, listening to these stories, I like, please, I'm not trying to hear that stuff, because they did whatever the justice system gave them, sentences or whatever, it was fair, it was right, it was just. Because I was raised with a mother and father who were academic educators and a father who was a probation officer at one time. I saw not what other people saw. So with that said, when my son, when they called me down to the magistrate office and said to me, your son is been locked up in jail and he will be spending the rest of his life in jail, if you don't go in that room and get him to talk and tell us who those 3 other guys that are friends of him. I will say, and I know I only have 5 minutes, and I'm going to speed it up. I literally, in front of my husband, went to the floor. Went to the floor. I cried like a baby. I went to the floor. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. There was nothing for me to move forward on, to how to handle them telling me this. That the police lied. That they can lie and it's legal. And that they fear-mongered me. They fear-mongered this mother who know nothing about crime. Yes, I grew up in New York, in Harlem, but that don't mean I know about crime. Let's get that, sometimes people get it twisted. That you from New York, you're wild, don't want to work, poor, and loud. Now, loud I may be, but all that other stuff ain't. So, okay, I'm like, all right, something ain't right with that. So they said, well, we'll give them a plea bargain for 12 years. I'm like, I haven't even told y'all the crime. So I'm like, I don't know. And then I said, no, we didn't. He decided he didn't want anything. Because everybody kept telling me when I told him the crime, what he was indicted for, they kept saying, oh no, he ain't going to no prison. They're just trying to figure. They just want the other guys and then blah, blah, blah. Trusting the legal system, moving forward on that note, my son was indicted for 3 counts of accessory to robbery with simulated weapon. Accessories. Simulated weapon meant when they went into the Asian stores, one of his friends had a problem with the Asian people. Anyway, they went in there, grabbed a do-rag, they listed the stuff, do-rags, cigarettes, and 3 lottery tickets. That was the thing, okay? True story, you can look it up, do whatever you need to do. So we're like, okay, it's still a crime, it's a crime, it doesn't matter what he stole, But he didn't hurt nobody, they didn't have no gun. But they asked the people, they said, did you see their hands? And they said, if the victim would say, the store person would say, no, they didn't. And they said, well, I don't know. They said, well, could it have been in their pocket? They said, well, yeah. Okay, simulated weapon. Because in Virginia, if you look or they can't see your hands, is that. So that was it. So we still in a phase, my husband and I are like, that's okay. My son, justice shall prevail. It's fair. The government is fair. The police is fair. Everybody is fair. Okay? Moving forward from that, sentencing. Oh, we decided, everybody kept saying, don't do them 12 years. Everybody said, don't do the plea bargain. Get you a lawyer. We went and got us one of the best lawyers, Boatwright. Do you know Boatwright? Who's deceased? Boatwright. Lawyer said, oh, no, your son, if anything, he get maybe 3 years, up to 5. He said, he even showed me how to do a pre-sentencing report. I went home and did it, and he showed me. He said, oh, don't worry about it. So we decided to put the money up and get this done so he can return back to school and get his life together from there. When we went to court, 21 letters of leniency were submitted. 21 letters from the public in my son's life, from the church, from everywhere, people that knew him, and everything was submitted. When we left there that day, my son left not with a 3 to 5 pre-sentencing report recommendation. 8 years you would add, it would be a total of 8 if you add the simulated gun in it. So they asked for 2. The judge gave my son, long story, I know it sounds like I keep saying that, gave my son 128 years under a no parole system. Under a no parole system. And that is when my life changed, and that is when the fight in me came about. That is when the fight, and I shall not stop fighting. Regarding my son and moving and then getting into my work, that's something I really want to tell you about. Regarding my son, something just happened on Sunday. My son has been incarcerated now 14 years for a 3 to 5 years thing on there. My son, this is my son. I just want y'all to know. He is a real person. That is me and him. My son has been incarcerated 14 years with not ever having an infraction of any kind, exemplary, to the point that he was submitted up for clemency recently, where his job at the prison, 23 cents an hour, wrote a letter of recommendation, where his counselor wrote a recommendation. All of the things. He has since finished college since being incarcerated. He has taken on he didn't have any kind of vocational skills. He has done 2 years while working, did brick masonry and advanced brick masonry. He has done the work for a crime that, yes, he says he participated in as accessory for allowing them to use his car, and he thought justice would prevail. Well, he went up. There was a thing about him with clemency. I don't know if anybody has heard that Virginia has recently done a parole commission. Well, that parole commission turned out to deny my son clemency because it is a political climate. And at this time, I was just told yesterday before coming here, on the phone while I was driving here, by the person, that is not the right climate right now. Politics, they may not get, because the overwhelming, in Virginia, the mention of parole commission has led to overwhelming public support against and for the status quo to remain and against reinstating parole or any kind of early release. So because of that, my son now must remain. He's not doing 127 years. I forgot to tell you, we did go and spend more money and got it down to 28 years. So he's done 14. He has to finish the remainder unless somebody has the backbone and the spine to give him an early release to clemency. But I'm not here to even beg or plead or anything for my son, because he's gonna be okay. He's going to be okay. Here's the thing. Through my plight, everybody's talking about parole. And I say this real quickly. Through my plight, Miss Anna, Lois, my girl here, you don't know what sisterhood is like. Sisterhood has been Anna, my girl Lois, and Barbara Fair. Not against anyone else, but that's who I've known. That's who was there for me to get this fight started. That's who's paved the way, gave me the knowledge to be empowered so that I can have the power to try to make a difference. And you know what happened? What's going on right now? Forget about parole in Virginia, because through 2010, our organization, on the backs of prisoners' complaints about sentencing injustices, have discovered 2 major sentencing injustices, and if we are able to correct these injustices of the past that remain uncorrected, it will, believe it or not, parole would not even be an answer, because in Virginia they only parole 3% of eligibility. But we have discovered, we have the proof, but they hide, they don't want it to get known. And so I don't have the voice, the vehicle to put that voice out there to let people know. So what I've done is we started in 2013 a mobile justice tour. And we've been touring cities and counties and informing people on justice-related issues. And that brought about Ban the Box, 13 municipalities through mobile justice tour. It led to put the pressure on, well, not the pressure, the governor, it made it easier for him to do an executive order for Ban the Box on the state level. We were in D.C. last week. I was with Vivian when she spoke at Ban the Box on the federal, for federal hiring. So my point is, shared knowledge and sharing information can make a real difference in change. Because I was so surprised in doing my trips, when I would take the families to the trip, they knew nothing about nothing. They didn't even, some of them said they didn't even know who their warden was. They didn't even know Folder. They didn't know a lot of things. And they're not dumb. They just don't know. Because I'm not dumb. I have my bachelor's degree. I'm intelligent. I can articulate things, but I didn't know. And my son sits in prison today. So I'm going to end, because I know I went over the time, but one note and one recognition. Barbara ain't talk about this here. If anybody know about Up the Ridge, a documentary by Nation Inside, then you know that's Barbara Fair, who came to Virginia and got their prisoners out of Virginia single-handedly.
Thank you, Lily. I get her emails quite frequently from her organization, and it's very good for me to know the background behind the work that you do, and I'm looking forward to doing more work. I don't know how Governor Terry McAuliffe is going to feel about some stuff, but we need to make some more noise in Virginia. So next up, Grace. Who's Grace on the panel? Okay, because I haven't met you or seen your face, so thank you so very much for being here. Grace is the mother of 3 children from Sulphur, Louisiana, whose first exposure to juvenile justice system came as the parent of a court-involved youth who at age 14 was sent to the notorious Tallulah Correctional Center for Youth, where he was abused and mistreated. She helped organize these parents to form the Lake Charles chapter of Families and Friends of Louisiana's Incarcerated Children. Grace became the Executive Director of Justice for Families in October of 2013. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I wanted to mention 2 things that I heard other people say. One is that anytime we come into a room like this, I feel like it's really important to bring those that weren't in the room with us here. And I want to bring my mom, Mary Donahue, and my son, Corey Bauer, into this room with me today. And the second thing that I just wanted to acknowledge that other people said and to ditto it repeatedly is that we all stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. And it was so nice last night to see the panel of young people and to think, we don't have to keep doing it forever. There's a new batch of folks coming in and y'all are so powerful and strong. It's just amazing. So in 2001, about the same number of women that are sitting at this table today came together in a living room in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, because we went from being the first in lynching to the first in incarceration. And this very small group of women came together to fight about the juvenile justice system in Louisiana. And 2.5 years later, they managed to close what the New York Times called the worst juvenile prison in the country at that time, a place called Tallulah Correctional Institute for Youth. And it wasn't them alone. It took a big bunch of us to do it, and a lot of friends and a lot of time, but I think a very short while in the grand scheme of things when we think about how long we've been fighting on criminal justice issues. This went really quickly. So in 2001, when my son entered into that system, there were nearly 2,000 kids housed in 4 brutal prisons around the state. And Tallulah was chosen because it was a scandalous prison and it was an easy target. And so we went after that prison first. But 2.5 years later, when the Juvenile Justice Reform Act was passed, it dropped the number of kids in secure care from almost 2,000 to less than 500, where it's remained in all these years. And the reason that I bring that story up today, I haven't talked about it in a while, and the reason I bring it up today is because I think we're on a precipice of criminal justice reform in this country. I can feel it, and I talk to other people that feel it, that talk about that there's energy, there's new energy around this stuff, and things are happening, and laws are being passed, and policies being changed. But the reason I bring up the closed Tallulah story is because so what, we closed a prison, and there's less kids in secure care in the state of Louisiana. Ultimately, Louisiana remains one of the highest incarceration states in this country. And I'm very nervous. I'm excited, but I'm nervous about what the reforms are that we see coming. Because those reforms are not being decided by the people that are the most directly impacted by incarceration and mass criminalization in this country. And that's scary to me, because my son's in prison and he's doing a 12-year sentence, and of course I want him to come home. Everybody wants theirs to come home. But what scares me about the reforms that we're talking about today is that if we don't put things in place and we don't address the underlying issues of mass criminalization, which is racism and oppression, then we bring folks home to a place where they're not going to go out and get jobs because they have to admit on the applications. They're not going to have a place to live. They're not going to be able to get subsidies to help them get on their feet. Only in a very few places, thanks to folks like those up here, will they even be able to get an education or be prepared when they come out to get a new job, get a job and take care of their families. And what happens then? What will the backlash be? When we turn folks out and we give them nothing and we don't address the underlying issues, what will happen then? And I just wanted to bring that up today and ask that folks give it consideration, because I think it's very easy for us to all get really excited about this, and it's very hard. My son was just coming up for a parole hearing. And you know he's not going to get out. I knew he wasn't going to get out. But there were still a couple of little moments there where I thought, oh, he might. Just one little glimmer of hope, even though I knew he wouldn't. And so I think it's very tempting when we've been brought down to this level, and I hear Barbara and everybody up here and everyone else here talking about these deeply painful situations, and I think, you know, we're all looking for that little bit of hope. So just keep in mind that we are talking about mass criminalization, not just mass incarceration. We're talking about the underlying issues of structural racism and oppression. And we're talking about a whole lot of people in this country who really want to do the right thing and be able to go home, but that we all of us have to keep our eye on this and make sure that what these reforms are actually are reforms that makes a difference. And just today, the group that I worked with in Louisiana to close down that prison was called Families and Friends of Louisiana's Incarcerated Children, still in existence today, still hammering in Louisiana every day. And we took that model, Zachary Norris and I at the Ella Baker Center, we brought that model to the national level, created Justice for Families. We used a little bit of data that we knew it was out there. It had never been proven before, but we did a lot of surveys and research around the country, and we brought that with families. We put together that report, and we've been working with the juvenile justice system in sites around the country to try and change the way that they work with families. And I think it was also Angela that mentioned that we don't have that place at the table. And what we've tried to do with that report and in the with the information that we gathered from that report is to ensure that families have a place at the table to be able to give their input, so that when we do something, when we do reform juvenile justice, and it has been reformed a great deal, but when we do these things, it's led by the people that are impacted by it, not by people who went to school to be criminal justice majors, right? That doesn't tell you about my community. That doesn't tell you about the culture of my community. That doesn't tell you how it is to survive in my community. And I'm not saying you're not smart, you're really smart. You just don't know what I know and what the families around this know, right? My last 3 points, and I'll hush. Data, you can't argue with the facts. You can't argue with the facts. And we have enough data. You know, there's no argument left there. We've won that war, right? But then the grassroots organizing, building that base, getting out into the community and talking about what it is we know, telling our stories, even though I'm really tired of telling about the worst day of my life. I'm tired of talking about that. But it takes all of us so that we can all get out there and tell our stories, and it doesn't fall on just a few folks to have to keep telling that story over and over. But using our stories to back up that fight and to put a face, like the young woman and her mother earlier today, put a face on that data and make the argument. And then we don't win just because we're right. We win because we make a demand and because we have the power. And there are plenty of us in this country that have been impacted by this, that we do have the power. It's just the joining connections, and that's why I just want to thank Angela so much for bringing us here today and giving us another chance to make all those connections happen. Thank you.
Wow, great. So I will never forget you. And I know we need to keep going, but it's really moving me at the fact that, and I know, I'm not trying to interject my stuff, but to have 3 mothers on the panel who they're dealing with their child being incarcerated or about to be incarcerated and still doing this work. And I know what my parents' pain was when they were out there speaking and advocating, not just for me. At first it was just about me. But then once they came into the prison and saw and met some of the other women and seeing them in the children's center playing with their kids, where they became committed and were doing the same thing and still do the same thing that you women are doing. So I'm going to move on to the next person, but thank you all for your strength. Dorothy Johnson Spite. She is founder and executive director of Mothers in Charge Incorporated. Dorothy Johnson Spite was born to be the mother of Khalik Jabbar Johnson, but at the young age of 24, his life was taken from him, not by illness or accident, but by an act of violence over a parking space. Grief-stricken and enraged by this senseless act, Dorothy channeled that energy into the founding of Mothers in Charge, a grassroots organization dedicated to violence prevention and education and intervention, an organization that will provide support to grieving families as well as awareness and education to the public in an effort to prevent others from enduring the pain of losing a loved one to an act of violence. Ms. Johnson Spade.
Thank you. I'd like to say, first of all, I'm honored to be here. and very emotional as well. As you can probably imagine from the work I do, I'm not a stranger to tears and emotions, but today I've been truly moved by the panel here, of the courageousness of these women, and most thankful for Andrea's vision. I met her a few years ago and was just moved by her work. I'd like to share a picture of my son. This is his picture. His name, as you heard, was Colleague. He was 24 years old. He was shot to death over a parking space in Philadelphia. And needless to say, I thought my life would end as a result of his murder. But at some point, I decided that I was going to live. I was going to get up and make a difference because of his death. So as a result of that, 12 years later, we have 10 chapters of Mothers in Charge across this country, made up of mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and sisters who've lost children to violence. And it's a pain that no one should have to experience or have to endure. But I didn't want it just to be a support, and we provide support to families who've lost loved ones. I didn't just want it to be a support group. I wanted it to make a difference with the issue of violence. So in 2008, I was appointed trustee of the Philadelphia Prison Board, where a young man who was a friend of my son's had just became a correctional officer and decided to have Mothers in Charge come to House of Correction, where they were housing juveniles who had committed oftentimes murder or would be in charge with murder. He thought that we could talk with them, the young men, that he was devastated, blown away that so many of them would be in charge and coming into the criminal justice system. He thought that the mother's stories could make a difference because he knew that that's what we did. We go into the schools and we work with young kids and teach conflict resolution and anger management and all those kinds of things. So he arranged for us to go in, and we met young men, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all under 18, who had made the bad choice and decision of picking up a gun in most cases. We started going there on a regular basis. Some of the mothers in our organization couldn't go. They said that they didn't know if they could look at the person who may have been responsible for the person who killed their son. But there were many of us that knew that they were all our sons and that we had to try to reach them. These were young men, oftentimes just caught up in peer pressure, lots of things that happen to young people who are not always able or making the right decisions. So we started doing that program, and we still do that today. We were going in 2 times a week. We're now going once a week. Dr. Patton was one of the ones who began to go in, who coined the phrase, "They're all our sons," when someone asks, how do you know you're not talking to the person who murdered your son? We go in, we've done all kinds of programs with these young men, and it's a hurt piece to see a 15-year-old be in charge with the first-degree murder and going away for the rest of his life. And in Pennsylvania, life means life. There's no parole. So moving forward, fast forward a little bit, we still do that program. It's an amazing program. One of the things the social worker said to us was that when we would bring men from the community to come in and be mentors to these teenage boys, she was commented on the fact that oftentimes the interaction between the men that we brought in to mentor these young boys and the young boys was amazing, that they were so engaged. And she said that most times, in many of these cases, this was the first time that some of these young men had had a positive interaction with an adult male. Many of them were separated from their dads and things like that, and very angry oftentimes as a result of that. But fast forward a little bit, I think it was about 8 years ago maybe now, we got a letter from a woman who was incarcerated. Her name is Lisa Burton. She was incarcerated at our only county jail in Philadelphia. She was there for drug addiction, pretty lengthy sentence. While she was there, her 17-year-old son, was murdered on the streets of Philadelphia. We know that oftentimes when the mother is absent, she's the head of the household, as you heard earlier. Oftentimes 70% of the women are head of households. So when that mother's not there, oftentimes the child becomes engaged in ways maybe to even just survive. So her son had snatched a gold chain off of an older man's neck, as he said, at a stop sign, and rode off on his bike, and the guy drove him down, got out the car, and shot him to death. So we started going in and found that there was a lot of situations like that at Riverside Correctional Facility, started connecting with the women that were there, and really started trying to figure out how we could help them to come home, stay home with their children, so that their children didn't become victims or perpetrators of violence. which is sometimes what happens when the mother is absent from the home because of incarceration. So since that time, we've done many different programs there. We do a program called Thinking for a Change. Most recently last year, we started a program called Women Working for a Change, where we took 15 women that were recently incarcerated in the last 90 days and provided a 10-week job training program for them, where we paid them $200 a week, and we, at the end of that time, that 10-week period, was able to place them all in jobs and things like that. So we continue to do this work, and I'm just glad to be a part of this movement now. My journey is different from your journey, but it brings us to the same place. How do we help, folks that are unfairly incarcerated? How do we provide the support that they need? How do we support the families? These children oftentimes end up in foster care, or end up dead, or incarcerated themselves. So, especially with the violence we see in our community, no one wins. We're trying now, and we've had some talks, and even with some people on the panel here, and I want to acknowledge my two sisters out in the audience from Lipstick here in Boston, Ruth and Kim Odom, who are also mothers who lost children to violence, who are doing this work. I applaud you all here in Boston for what you do. But we know, as the sister Vivian so elegantly phrased, collectively, we've got to work together. It's got to be all of us or none of us. We've got to all work together. No one's safe until we're all safe. We've got to join forces as sisters in this struggle and become one and fight for what we need and what we know we have to have for our children, our families, our loved ones. We really got to turn the system around. And I thank Andrea for enlightening me on the work and understanding better, because I think that's what's needed oftentimes, is the education of what is happening. A lot of us don't know. People who have not truly been affected by it don't have a clue. But I know that if they were educated and understood our plight and what we're trying to do, we'd have more people on board. It doesn't have to be someone who's incarcerated to be a sister to someone who's trying to help someone who is incarcerated. It doesn't have to be a sister who's lost a son or a daughter to violence to be about that fight. Because we know that no one wins with any of that. So collectively, we're all just a sister way, and we've got to work together to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just hearing everybody's individual testimony. I was fortunate years ago to come here in Boston. It was a state representative woman, I can't remember her name, but she had a big conference for mothers who have experienced losing their child due to violence. And it's a big thing here in Boston. So I thank you for your courage. And she said, I met you there, I think, but it's such a blessing to see your strength in spite of, and helping to lead others and having different chapters across the country. So thank you for all that you do. Yes.
I just want to also mention, I forgot to mention, there's a program that we're looking at called Operation Fresh Start. If you Google it, it's a way that we bring our loved ones home from incarceration. And there's a Judge DeLeon, who's out of Philadelphia, who's working really hard around this effort to find ways of computation and things like that. It's a very kind of out-of-the-box kind of thinking. I sent it to you, Andrea. But it's called Operation Fresh Start. If anyone's interested, please contact me and let me know. We can have him come and talk about what he's doing across this country with that.
Where's our, thank you, Ms. Darby. Where's our Louis D. Brown folks? You guys stand, oh, here we are. Okay, great. This is the daughter of Tina Cherry, who started that organization that mirrors the work of Dorothy Johnson Spice. Both of those mothers have been doing that for at least that long. And Tina's daughter is here. And she lost her brother, and Tina lost her son. How many years has it been now?
21.
21 years. And here in Boston, just like in Philadelphia and across the country with Mothers in Charge, we have an incredibly strong chapter, a couple of them,
Mother Lisa Smith.
Mothers for Justice and Equality, the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, that are working, and they just had a phenomenal panel on this very issue. And it's so important what Sister Dorothy is talking about in terms of the connectivity and seeing that we are all in this fight together.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to point this out and thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Next on the panel, I apologize for not having your bio. Patricia Vickers is in Human Rights Coalition and the Movement magazine in Pennsylvania. So I'd love to hear more of what you're doing, Patricia.
Thank you. Like they used to say in church when I was a kid, well, they would get up and say, I'm just glad to be here. I'm just glad to be here and the connection that I feel with everyone in here. I'm with the Human Rights Coalition, and I have a son who's serving a life sentence in prison. And we started the Human Rights Coalition back in 2001 also, like many of the other mothers here. And we met, the first time we met, it was a group of women. And we all felt helpless and, like you said, like we didn't know what to do, who to turn to. We're all, had some type of education, but we didn't know how to help our loved ones who was in prison. The organization started from inside the prison. My son, who was a mentor to another prisoner, Russell Maroon Schultz, and they talked about having each prisoner contact a loved one, a mother or father, and with 2.5 million prisoners across the United States, if each one contacted their mother and father, and we started the Human Rights Coalition, it's about 5 million people. That's a huge power point. It's a huge constituency. And my mother always said to me, I think Vivian had mentioned this, my mother always said to me, one thing every prisoner has in common, and is they have a mother who loves them. Every prisoner has a mother who loves them. And we was thinking that would go one step further. Every prisoner has a mother or father, a husband or wife, a son or daughter who could stand up and support them. My son is serving life in prison, and I want him to come home just like everybody else does. But in the meantime, I want him to feel safe. I don't want anything to happen to him while he was in prison. And I'm always looking back at myself, trying to figure out where I fit into this and what did I do. And I just keep trying to, I don't know what I was going to say. I just kind of feel like it was my fault. What did I do wrong? I mean, I knew it wasn't my fault, but I'm thinking to myself, what did I do wrong? Why is my son serving life in prison? And even when I had went to court and the judge gave him the life sentence, I wasn't allowed in the courtroom because I was supposed to be a witness to the case, even though I wasn't even there. I was at work. But I went into the courtroom anyway because I wanted to see what's going on with my son in his trial. And the judge had the guards pull me up to the front of her podium, and she pointed her finger at me and told me all the things I wasn't supposed to be there, this, that, and other. If I wasn't such an unfit mother, my son wouldn't be there. And it basically dragged me out the courtroom. And I knew I wasn't, but that kind of like sticks in the back of your head. And so I just felt like a lot of other mothers in the Pennsylvania area felt helpless just as I did. And they were basically afraid or embarrassed to fight for their loved ones because their loved ones had been labeled criminals. And everybody knows that criminals don't deserve anything special. Not even special. I mean, we just want them to be treated like human beings. We want them to have proper food, clothing. We don't want them to be abused. And that's what we fight against with the Human Rights Coalition. We fight to fight against the abuse and torture that goes on behind bars. And a lot of people will say, oh, I didn't know this was happening, or they don't believe this was happening. We get letters, hundreds and hundreds of letters with men and women writing about how they're being abused in prison. They want us to help them. And the best we can do is make it public, make the world know what's going on. So with the Human Rights Coalition, we do that by publishing what started out as a newsletter, and now it's like a magazine, and we publish this magazine quarterly. And the idea behind it was to put a human face on these men and women in prison. Like, they're not animals, you know? They're not all drug addicts. They're not out to kill each other in prison. They're human beings. They have wives, they have husbands, they have children, they're artists, they're poets. Everyone in prison is not guilty. And some of them, even the crime that they did, is the sentence that they received is unwarranted. So we try to put a human face on the prisoners and have their stories, their poems, their artwork published in this magazine. And we send it to the families and the prisoners. The prisoners more so, we give them information on what's going on out here, like this type of conference. They like to hear that kind of stuff. It gives them hope, like somebody is doing something out there, somebody's looking out for us. And from the family's point of view, we give them information on what's going on inside the prison, because they always say, I didn't know. We even send some to the Secretary of Corrections in Pennsylvania, Secretary Wetzel. We send him a copy. And somebody said, why don't you send the legislators a copy? I said, well, that's a good idea. We'll send the legislators a copy too. So, and we have, photos and pictures and just everything that's going on out here. And another thing we do is we are fighting against solitary confinement. Because we found that the men and women in prison, if you speak out, if you see something going on that's wrong and you speak out against it, that's the first thing they do is throw you in solitary confinement. That's a repercussion. If they're angry at you, but they don't like you, they'll throw you in solitary confinement. Once you're in solitary confinement, all bets are off. I call it the breeding ground for torture. Turn the camera the other way, and they do whatever they want to do to you in there. They have men that have complained about them not getting their meals, being in a cold cell in the wintertime. They've been thrown in there nude, naked, without any clothes in a cell. They have mental patients in that solitary confinement unit that are screaming and banging on the walls. We got all types of stories. I have a few letters I got from the women who were in prison when I told them I was coming. A couple of them wrote me a letter. I had put some of it in here, but I don't think I'm gonna read it. But one of the things the lady said was that the searches, like if you're walking down the hall, and I call this abuse. When you're walking, they can just stop you at any time and feel you, all up and in between your legs. And these are men, guards. And if you don't comply or if you don't go along with what they want you to do, you'll be thrown into solitary confinement. And one of the women who was there, she's home now, her name is Val Bell, she was telling me that the women who are there long term are preyed upon by the guards and the staff that work there for sexual favors, because they know they're not going to come home too soon. And if you don't comply, then you're retaliated against. And she even said that some of the women get pregnant while they're in prison. And nobody says anything about this. And how are you getting pregnant in an all-female women's prison? And she said the babies are delivered with the mother being shackled, chained by the leg. And the babies are, you see the baby for a minute and it's taken from you and they take it somewhere. So the mother is, mentally abused because she's had this baby, which she's had for 9 months, and it's taken from her. And the male, whoever fathered, he's off scot-free.
Yeah.
If they find out who he is, he may be fired, but it's no responsibility to the child. So I worry about the men and women who are in prison and what's going on. I'm with you guys. I want them to come home. I want my son to come home. He's a juvenile lifer, and I want him to come home. But I'm also concerned with what's going on inside there while they're there.
Yeah.
That solitary confinement, when they come out, it's like post-traumatic syndrome when they come home from that solitary confinement. So that's a real issue. So Human Rights is working on that. We're also working on, we've joined a coalition with other groups in Philadelphia, and we started a new group called CADB. That's a coalition to abolish death by incarceration. And I say death by incarceration because in Pennsylvania, when you're sentenced to life in prison, you're in that prison until the day that you die. So my son is 17 years old, was sentenced to go to prison and stay there until the day that he's died. That's something I have to live with, he has to live with. But we formed this group called CABI, and we're going to fight for parole for lifers in Pennsylvania. And we're looking for, thank you. And we're looking for this to be a huge coalition, not just 3 groups that started, Incarcerate PA, Fight for Lifers, and Human Rights Coalition, but we're looking for a huge coalition to back us up with this. And we're going to put forth some legislation so that when you do get parole, they can't deny you. I'm not real familiar with all of the legal part of it, but it's something called presumptive parole that we're going to put into the legislation, so that when you meet 20 or 25 years, that you're presumed to get parole without any, unless you've done something really, you've done something that will prevent you from. But if you haven't done any infractions in the system, then you will get parole. So that's the idea. We're trying to get everybody to back that. I have a 3-point platform about solitary confinement. Like I said, the CABI group is just starting, but we need a lot of support. We had a launch on June 8th, and I talked to Tina about getting the legislators, how she get in contact with the legislators and get on their side. So I learned that here, and I'm going to apply that. So I think that's it.
Thank you so much. Okay, there's so much I would want to say, but I'm going to forego saying it. Karen Garrison, I've had the opportunity. Patricia, thank you for your voice. Thank you for sharing other people's voices and your magazine and sending it to the legislators, because those are the people who need to hear those stories.
Is there a subscription people can get to the magazine?
All they need to do is give me their name and address, and I'll have it mailed to them.
Great. And you take donations to help you to send those?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so Karen Garrison, I've had the opportunity to work with her. She has been a strong warrior for her boys, and I'm sure she will share more about them. But she's a proud mother of Lawrence and Lamont Garrison, who are incarcerated under the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines. For the past 18 years, she has attended and participated in events to get the word out about the war on drugs. She now hosts the Mommy Activist and Sons radio show to make a difference in a responsible way by updating and assisting prisoners and their families. And Karen, I'm just going to let you tell the rest.
That's good. Thank you so much, Karen.
You're welcome.
Because I always thought I had a place to do I knew I had a place and something to do when I picked myself off the floor when they gave my sons 19 and a half and 15 and a half years for boys that had graduated from Howard University with good grades. You know, I'm the hood rat and I claim it and it's okay, but I didn't do it for my sons. My sons went to school every day, they never missed a beat. But when this happened, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. You know, my mother was looking at me, my uncle was looking at me, the whole neighborhood was, oh, don't worry, they on I got them on Channel 9 News. They say, don't worry, them boys gonna be home. That's not what happened. You know, but as I began to think about it and read magazines, Emerge that you were in, and read around, I said, wait a minute, I know about this. In 1982, between 1984, I was arrested with a whole guy in the conspiracy, drug conspiracy, and what I did, they said, don't worry, nobody's going to do anything to you. Collecting the money was not a crime to them, and it wasn't to me either. But it was a way to keep my refrigerator full, to use, to get my house straight, to be able to go get my cosmetology manager's license, because I already had my cosmetology license. Because I want to tell you, I have a PhD, professional hair designer. I wear it well, and I wear it with pride because I was at the top of my game. And I tell anybody, if I went in a salon today, give me a week and I can do everything those girls are doing because I had a strong foundation and a passion for it. But that was transferred to now, to what brings me here now. My sons are home. Lawrence has been home, I guess, 6 years, and Lamont's been home 4 years. Thank you, Angela. It's been, 4 years, and it's not, it's like a foundation you work upon. I don't do hair anymore. My last client passed. That was my mother. So I don't do that anymore, but I still have the passion that I transferred it over to this. Because when I started to do things, I started to read, and then I realized this is what I can share. This is what I know. I think the first time I spoke in 1999 or something for Families Against Mandatory Minimums, I brought with me a dictionary, the Holy Quran, a legal dictionary. I bought another legal, some kind of book, and I put it there and put it on the table. And I told them, my neighbors want to know, now I don't come outside so much anymore. They think I'm in there crying because they knock on the door and say, the lady across the street said, come on out here, don't be in there crying. But I wasn't. I was in there trying to learn how to use a computer that they tried to give my sons a charge for. I was trying to learn, to better myself, to get in that, to study, to see. I know this is not right. My boys got to come home, but I got a rude awakening. After 5 years, I realized pro bono was stinky. Nothing was happening, and I had to fight. But they knew how to read, and they knew they were going to be attorneys. This knocked it down. They say they wouldn't be an attorney for nothing. They said, look, they're not going to do that to me in my life. So they won't be attorneys. They can't, probably, anyway. But, when I think about what you have to do, where can I be? When I would go places, I thought that when I saw things on the news and politicians and people were there, I didn't know the public was invited. I thought it was just for certain people, that they made these decisions for us, because I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I was happy because I saw the dreams of my sons. Because as a mother, you want the best for your child. And one thing, I think when I went to speak somewhere, I didn't know any better. I went to speak in the criminal justice thing, all these police and everything, asked me to come speak, and the guy was so nice to come pick me up. And one girl said to me, she said, how do I know you're not an angry black woman? That's a white girl that said that to me. I told her, what makes you think that I'm not? But anger doesn't have to be what you think I should be as a black woman. I said, my anger is that I don't know enough to get them home. That's my anger. And the thing about it, after 5 years, nobody cares but me, my mother, my uncle, and my son, that they're innocent. What they care now, too much time for whatever this crime was. So today I work on helping. I get in where I fit in. And if I can find something in D.C. that I can get to, or anywhere I can get to, I go. Because what I want to do is take notes, copious notes, Nikiji. I take copious notes to be able to go back on the radio show, and I'm stuttering and stammering sometime when I got to read these legal papers or read these articles that I've read before with the big words in it I don't ever use. But I put it out there. Then I go to Mommy Activists and Sons Facebook group, and I put it there. I put everything. So if you don't get it, you don't want it. But it's out there. But one thing I want to do before I go any further, people have been thanking everybody, and it's one person I never forget, and that's you, Angela Fraser, you know, and Fraser getting ready to be Giles, you know, and I don't want anybody to ever forget that I don't forget. Because when I came to work somewhere and I was just supposed to be straightening out files, I know I could do that because I know the alphabet. You know, but that's how simple it seemed like it was going to be. But that was the little snowball that kept going and kept going and kept going. And that's any of us. You know, because some things are directly black issues. White folks can't carry it. And then some things are our issue that we all carry. But, you know, as a black woman, I can't tell you how you feel as a white woman when both your sons go to jail. But I can tell you as a black woman how I felt in Virginia when that attorney slammed that door in my face. Mm-hmm. And it was just a door, that a public door everyone could go through. So I started to get different feelings about things, but I started to read. And that's when I decided to do the radio show that I work on now. And I called it Mommy Activists and Sons. One son is not mine, but he's one that always I realize they all calling me mommy like the boys do. So he helped me with the radio show. And I realize now when someone gave me a congratulations, it's been 7 years for the radio show. I started with On My Way Home because I remember when Lawrence came home, we started planning 4 years ahead of time before he came home. And there was still so many things we didn't know. And we didn't know how to ride the metro. Angela had to take him and I because I only rode it 10 times. And I told Angela, I said, you got 2 students here. You know, but it's the things that you have to do that you don't plan. I know he was at Hope Village in Washington, D.C., and I want to make sure you know that's the worst halfway house ever. It has not changed, and I want to stand up on that. It has not changed since 1984 when I was in there. It's not safe. People come home, and they come home, and they call on the phone, and they tell their mother or their loved one, I'm home. Before they can get clothes over there, somebody has come in there because they were an informant and killed them. And I don't care if they snitched or not, they should have been safe there. It's not safe. There's nothing for re-entry there. If that's what a halfway house is supposed to be, it's not. And they're getting ready to come up for contract, and I want to get these email addresses and all the things that people today say they want to do something to help me, not let them get that contract again. Not for 20 years. That's what the other contract was. You know, and it's just terrible. But I know why I do the radio show, and it's these organizations, these people here, and you that come. When I go on the radio, sometimes I've invited them, they don't come, I don't care because I'm going to kick it in anyway. I advertise or I announce their events, I announce what they do so my listeners will know, because you have to deal with this in a responsible way. It's not enough for me as a black mother, a black woman, a black person to go sit in a public hearing and I can't articulate. I can't understand enough to go and say where I've been or what I've done. And that's why I do the Mommy Activists and Sons show, and that's what I do. But I also have, I want to say adopted people, adopted issues that you can't. Sometimes at night when I go to bed, I say, I just want to just don't breathe for a minute, just to get it out my system. But I do, you know, and I listen, I think about some of these, extreme sentences, how I worked so hard for Clarence Aaron. I started a prayer call. High-powered mainline calling just to get to pray for him to come home and the extreme sentences. And I never, because his mother was his family is a God-fearing, loving family. And that inspired me to continue it. You know, but you do the things you do. I have two things I do. One thing is the show I'm doing, 21 episodes of how to get an idea of what you can do to transition, to re-enter. You have people, you're transitioning with that person. So when they come home, you got to remember, this is not that same person that wore these shoes. He got new shoes now. And he has new shoes to fill. And you do too, because you have a responsibility. You know, and I feel like if you love them, that should be your responsibility to help them. So I had 21 episodes. And one thing I had started, and Andrea was on it before, I did something called WHY, Conversations of Reason. And there were conversations of what they did as an organization, but it also put what they need, because everybody can't do everything, but maybe you can do something that they need. The emails are so important. The social media is so important. So those are two things I work with. And then I had Terry Young with the extreme sentencing. What's her name? I'm sorry. Sandra Rucker, that had 13 life sentences. She got 30 years now. So, I've been talking to her since my boys were in Warsaw in '98. And so things are changing, but this is not change for the best. They should have popped that door and kicked her out of there. How you gonna give somebody 13 life sentences just for selling drugs? If you live in a neighborhood like mine, it's not your fault all the time. You got the drug, but it's the people that come to get it that make it bad too, man. Because they show their butt for they go home back to Virginia or back to the suburb, and their family doesn't know because they can function like this. Those are the things I work with. And then, Kimba always pushed out your story. Ever since my boys got to anywhere, I knew about her story. And I'd say, and another horrible story was Kimba Smith. So that was something that I worked on. And Dorothy Gaines, I worked all the time. Every time I could do anything for her. When she came, I do the flyers and stuff and everything, and she was proud to be here because she has a story that is unbelievable, the way she puts everything together. And Women Who Never Give Up, I'm the volunteer vice president of Women Who Never Give Up for Gail Muhammad. And I don't have too much a problem with keeping focused, but I try to keep her very focused. And then House of Dreams is a girl in Virginia that has a wonderful foundation that she helps with reentry. That's another very good story for her. And Moms United Against the Drug War. I was called the DC chapter in a gala or something. They gave one evening. I didn't know. She said, "Why didn't you sit up front?" I said, "Well, I didn't know." She said, "You're the DC chapter." And when she announced it, I was like, "Oh, well, okay, that's good." Because it's what I believe in, But, when I list the names like Terry Young, Sandra Rucker, Daniel Metz, Sharonda Jones, Jason Hernandez, William Underwood.
Yes.
And Paul Weinstock. Paul Weinstock had life. He worked himself out. He's home. Yes. And then Michelle West, of course, and Norman Brown that was on the list for commutation. He was the low man on the conspiracy of anything. He got life. And then Keith Biggins that's in prison with 3 life sentences. And Donald Wardrick, a native of Washington, D.C. that has 30 years. These are drug charges. Man, let these people home. Why don't you have parole? Because they could function and take care of their family and better themselves and stop whatever crime they were, committing or accused of. They have a chance. What about, they keep saying this is the United States is for second chances. Well, you done bumped your head more than one time, and second chances are not enough. But what happened to what was supposed to make America so beautiful? And I go on to say about Kwame Tiggs and Stephanie Nod that got home after even the death of her mother while she was in prison, and then Stephanie George that made it out. Mm-hmm. But my list goes on. But there are just as many women, just as many men, but I started to pay attention when they hit me on the head and took my boys out of there. Sometimes it does have to actually happen to you. Because if it doesn't happen to you, on the news, when I see stuff on the news, even then, I've been busted before and everything. I never saw the news stuff about me, because I was locked up. But when I see it, I say to myself, dang, what were they thinking? They did this, they did that. But you have to remember, and one thing I know, media will lie. Yes. But media will also not do their homework and do something quick, and it goes over top of everything, and they take the word of the government and just put one of the people that are impacted a minute on there. They already got the case, so you might as well go ahead and give them the time and go ahead and let you start working on getting them out. And I'll end with my main thing I said. For people not to carry a grudge. Each one of you can carry a torch to lead into something, to enlighten someone. Because I say on the show, what you hear here, don't let it stay here. Share it with somebody, because I bet you today somebody needs it. And that's my message to everyone. And I want us to we all talked about crime, we all talked about the injustice. So now we talked about crime. Come on, do the time, get on the Mommy Activist Show, because I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to do my homework for you, get on here. So I'll call you up. We have an interview before we have an interview on the radio. So you get mad because you can't do all that stuff, because I also know how to cut you off on the radio, too.
Thank you so much, Karen.
I thank you all for allowing me here, because I know that Mommy Activists and Sons is a radio show that leads in a responsible way. Thank you so very much.
This has been a great panel of women. Thank you all for your courage to speak out. I'm very, again, grateful for what Andrea has done in bringing us all together. It's personal for me because there are several women in the room that I was actually incarcerated with in federal prison. And so it means a lot for us to be a part of this movement. But for those of you all who weren't here yesterday, I gave birth to my son while I was incarcerated. It is all about families. Before I get into that, one thing that wasn't mentioned with this whole family concept is that you find in the war on drugs is you find that there are women that get in relationships with drug dealers, and let's say they go off to prison, and let's say if they are living on Section 8, and once that person, significant other, has done their time, they can't bring that person back into their household. So my point is that there's several collateral consequences that go with the person being convicted of a crime. And the word mass criminalization, y'all are taking me further with, it's not mass incarceration, it's mass criminalization in this country that needs to be changed from the forefront. And so the whole holding a torch, I'm going to hold that torch, but I am starting to hold a grudge. For the simple fact that I missed 6.5 years of my son's life. I gave birth to him 2 days after I gave birth to him. Like I mentioned, I wasn't able to hold, touch, smell. My parents raised him during those 6.5 years. A little girl that you see running around here, thank you, Andrea, for letting my daughter Phoenix come along with me to this conference. But when I look at her and realize that she is only 5 years old, and now I can actually conceptualize what it was, because I didn't experience that infancy, being there, really, what do they call it? Bonding. I only got to breastfeed 2 times while I was in the hospital. Thank God the nurse explained to me the importance of that. But yes, I am holding a grudge because now I know what I missed. And here you have a country, legislators, policymakers that, do they realize how life is being thrown out to people? Human beings that have families, that are destroying families. Michelle West lost her mother while she was incarcerated. I don't know how she remained strong with that. But we have to continue this movement. I know Andrea has a plan because I saw her writing things down. But I'm not going to hold this up for lunch anymore. But we need to shift the public, shift the legislators in understanding we need to reclassify what's a crime, because once a person has committed a crime, their life is changed forever. So I'm going to close with that.
Our family members, thank you very much. Please, people, so you see me writing and making bullet points over there. So for the future panelists, I am not keeping time. So if I'm looking at you, don't think you're going to stop talking. I'm just trying to make sure I'm catching the bullet points. Because we do have a plan, okay? And the plan is to make sure that everybody is connected and knows the work that everybody else is doing. So as we're out here doing our work, we know how to get the help, get the guidance from all of these brilliant minds that have been doing the work, that are on the ground doing the work from Boston to California, and even in other countries. So that's why we're keeping those notes over there, because we're not just leaving here after hearing some very difficult stories for all of us to continue to retell. We're leaving here with this master plan that we learned from the experts like Chrissy at Open Society, who you're going to hear from later, who is an expert at pulling all the information together and then showing us how it all connects. We learned that from them, from Chrissy. So thank you, panelists. These women are here. This is a working conference. If you have heard something that you need more information about or you want to learn, make sure you get their information, because when we leave here, we want you to connect and find out how you can continue to do the work that they're doing in some way. Thank you very much.